was one of those rare television moments that linger in the public imagination. A teenager steps nervously onto the stage of Britain's Got Talent, clutching fear in his fists, only to open his mouth and release a voice so powerful, so hauntingly divine, that it silences an entire nation. That teenager was Jonathan Antoine, a slightly awkward yet charming young man from Essex, whose operatic performance of The Prayer alongside Charlotte Jaconelli in 2012 didn't just earn a standing ovation, it earned reverence. In mere minutes, he became a global sensation, hailed as the next Pavarotti, and backed by Simon Cowell himself with a £1 million recording deal. But what happened after that iconic debut has been anything but straightforward. Almost as quickly as he rose to fame, Jonathan seemed to vanish from the mainstream spotlight. He didn't win the show. He didn't chase the pop charts. He didn't become a social media spectacle. Instead, whispers began to swirl. Did he quit? Was there a falling out? Was his sudden disappearance a choice, a consequence, or the result of something deeper, perhaps darker? Online speculation ignited into full-blown mystery. Some claimed he was overwhelmed by anxiety and industry pressure. Others suggested a secret diagnosis or a hidden project that demanded his silence. A few even wondered if his voice had failed him altogether. Over a decade later, fans are still asking the same question with undiminished urgency. What really happened to Jonathan Antoine? Today, we examine the facts, confront the rumors, and trace the extraordinary and at times turbulent journey of a young man whose voice once brought millions to tears, and who may still be writing the most important verse of his story far from the public eye. Long before the thunderous applause, the record deals, or the tabloid speculation, there was a quiet, thoughtful boy named Jonathan Frederick Antoine growing up in the suburban calm of Goodmayes, Essex. Born on January 13, 1995, Jonathan was the youngest in a family of four. His father, John, worked as a police inspector. His mother, Tracy, was a nurturing presence at home, and his older sister provided companionship during what would become a creatively charged, emotionally complex childhood. From an early age, Jonathan showed signs of an unusually rich inner world. He immersed himself in drawing, writing, and storytelling, often escaping into vivid imaginary landscapes far removed from the harsh realities of his school life. Unfortunately, those realities included intense bullying and ridicule, much of it directed at his weight and introverted nature. Classmates teased him relentlessly, and Jonathan's confidence steadily eroded until a pivotal moment changed everything. At the age of 11, a perceptive music teacher recognized something extraordinary in his voice and encouraged him to take formal singing lessons. What began as a form of personal therapy soon revealed a once-in-a-generation talent. Within a few years, Jonathan was performing publicly, and by the time he participated in the Stratford and East London Music Festival, he was named Young Musician of the Year, a title that brought him to the attention of several of the United Kingdom's most prestigious music institutions. He received offers from all four junior departments of London's elite conservatoires and eventually chose the Junior Royal Academy of Music, where he began training under acclaimed vocal coach Sarah Reynolds. For the first time, Jonathan's uniqueness was not only accepted, it was celebrated. In the safety of the rehearsal room and under the guidance of skilled mentors, he began to find his voice not just musically, but emotionally. This period marked a critical transformation, from a bullied boy seeking refuge in fantasy to a rising prodigy standing on the edge of national recognition. And yet, even as his technique improved and his confidence grew, no one could have anticipated the emotional earthquake that his voice would soon cause on one of the biggest stages in the world. In 2012, a seismic shift occurred in the British entertainment landscape when a 17-year-old boy with cascading curls and visible nerves walked onto the Britain's Got Talent stage, accompanied by his friend and duet partner Charlotte Jaconelli. What followed would not only redefine the public's understanding of youthful talent, but would etch itself permanently into talent show history. As a pair stood in front of the skeptical judges, most notably Simon Cowell, who visibly raised an eyebrow at Jonathan's anxious demeanor, there was a palpable sense of uncertainty in the air. Then the music began, and Jonathan opened his mouth. What emerged was a voice that shattered expectations, rich, operatic, and heartbreakingly powerful. Their rendition of The Prayer instantly transformed disbelief into awe, culminating in a standing ovation that roared across living rooms nationwide and quickly went viral online, amassing millions of views within days. Cowell, famously hard to impress, called it one of the most remarkable auditions he had ever seen. The contrast between Jonathan's fragile exterior and his vocal strength made him a media darling overnight, with outlets dubbing him the British Pavarotti and the voice that stopped time. But behind the sudden fame was a young man still wrestling with severe anxiety. Those close to him later revealed that backstage panic attacks and deep-seated insecurities often accompanied his public appearances, and Jonathan himself would later admit to moments of emotional overwhelm during the competition. Despite this, the duo advanced to the final round of the show and finished as runners-up, a result many viewers saw as a snub, given the depth and originality of their performances. The exposure was massive, and so was the pressure. Jonathan, thrust into a global spotlight, suddenly had to navigate the dual burden of public adoration and personal vulnerability. Yet in that unforgettable first performance, the stage had already become a sanctuary, however temporary, where his voice could speak the truths he struggled to express in everyday life. That moment was not just a breakout, it was a cultural inflection point, one that left millions asking not just who this boy was, but how such a sound could come from someone so visibly unsure of himself. Following their Britain's Got Talent finale, Jonathan Antoine and Charlotte Jaconelli were no longer just two talented teenagers from Essex. They were a hot commodity in the music world, and Simon Cowell wasted no time in securing their future with a reported £1 million record deal under his label Psycho Music. Their debut album, aptly titled Together, dropped in 2012 and was met with critical acclaim and commercial success, climbing swiftly into the UK top 5 and selling over 250,000 copies. The album was a carefully crafted blend of classical and contemporary selections, designed to highlight the magical duality of their voices. Charlotte's clear soprano and Jonathan's soaring tenor intertwined like instruments in a perfectly balanced orchestra. With performances on primetime television, appearances at major gala events, and photo shoots that filled glossy magazine spreads, the duo became media fixtures and fan favorites. But beneath the success, cracks were beginning to form, particularly for Jonathan. Industry insiders have since suggested that the pressure to conform to a specific image was especially intense. According to some reports, Jonathan was subtly urged to polish his appearance and soften his persona to better fit the traditional mold of a marketable classical artist. The media didn't help. Headlines frequently focused on his weight, appearance, and social awkwardness more than his vocal talent, reinforcing his insecurities and making an already sensitive teen feel as though he was constantly under a microscope. Meanwhile, the duo pushed forward, releasing their second album, Perhaps Love, in 2013, a more emotionally nuanced, musically adventurous project that deepened their artistic credibility and expanded their international reach. Yet something had shifted. In interviews, Jonathan appeared quieter, more distant, and increasingly contemplative, while Charlotte seemed to be leaning into the spotlight with growing confidence. Fans started speculating about tension or creative differences, noting fewer joint interviews and subtle changes in body language during performances. Though the music continued to soar, there was a looming sense that this golden partnership might not last. Fame had arrived swiftly, but so too had the pressures that came with it. And for Jonathan, who had always been more artist than entertainer, the weight of sudden celebrity was beginning to exact a toll. In February 2014, fans of Jonathan Antoine and Charlotte Jaconelli were hit with a bombshell that many had long feared, but few were ready to accept. The beloved operatic duo, whose harmony had once captivated a nation, would be going their separate ways professionally. The announcement came with a carefully worded joint statement declaring mutual respect, gratitude for their shared journey, and excitement about the solo recording contracts each had secured with Sony Classical. On the surface, it was a clean, amicable break, spun with optimism and class. But almost instantly, the rumor mill ignited into overdrive. Blogs, tabloids, and social media exploded with speculation. Had there been creative differences? A falling out? Jealousy? Fans dissected every public appearance from the past year, pointing to moments of silence, awkward glances, and reduced chemistry as signs that tension had been brewing. Some even suggested that Charlotte was ready to step into the spotlight while Jonathan, still battling his inner demons, preferred to retreat. Others proposed that the label had orchestrated the split in hopes of packaging the two as more profitable solo artists. There were even whispers, never confirmed, of disagreements over rehearsal commitments, image management, and long-term direction. But the duo maintained a united front, emphasizing their enduring friendship and downplaying any drama. Charlotte transitioned smoothly into musical theater, quickly earning roles in West End productions like Sweet Charity and Heathers, where she showcased her flair for live stage performance and further honed her acting chops. Jonathan, on the other hand, retreated slightly from public view, focusing on vocal refinement, emotional healing, and planning his debut as a solo artist. The media, however, didn't let go so easily. They continued to frame the story as a possible creative divorce, eager to feed a public hungry for scandal. Yet in truth, the breakup marked not the end of a story, but the beginning of two divergent paths, each shaped by different ambitions, personalities, and artistic instincts. For Jonathan, the road ahead would not be about sustaining fame, but about reclaiming control over his music, his mental health, and his identity as more than just half of a celebrated duo. In the months following the highly publicized split from Charlotte Jaconelli, Jonathan Antoine quietly embarked on a journey of reinvention, one that would not rely on viral fame or television exposure, but instead on authenticity, discipline, and the raw, emotional force of his voice. His debut solo album, aptly titled Tenore, was released in 2014 and instantly validated his decision to forge a path on his own terms. The album soared to #1 on the UK classical chart and peaked at #13 on the main albums chart, a remarkable feat for an 18-year-old operating within a genre so often sidelined by mainstream media. Critics praised the maturity in his voice, noting a newfound control and interpretive nuance that suggested Jonathan wasn't just surviving after the split, he was thriving. The success of Tenore was followed by his sophomore effort Believe in 2016, which, although less commercially dominant, again topped the classical rankings and expanded his musical repertoire to include sacred hymns, traditional arias, and modern crossover selections. With each release, Jonathan carved out a niche that was both classical and accessible, drawing in listeners who might have previously felt excluded from the genre. In 2018, he reached another milestone by headlining his first solo concert in the United States at the Thousand Oaks Civic Arts Plaza in California, an event that sold out and confirmed his growing international fan base. From there, his tour calendar steadily filled with dates across North America, the UK, and Canada, where audiences continued to respond with emotional intensity to his live performances. Unlike many of his reality TV peers who faded into obscurity or floundered under commercial pressure, Jonathan stayed grounded. He avoided overexposure, opted out of gimmicks, and maintained a relentless focus on craft. Each concert, each album, each appearance was a carefully chosen step in a long-term vision rooted not in celebrity, but in excellence. At a time when quick fame often leads to quick burnout, Jonathan Antoine demonstrated something rare: staying power. He was no longer the anxious teen who trembled on the BGT stage. He was an artist in full bloom, committed to the purity of his sound, the power of storytelling, and the quiet confidence of someone who knew he didn't need a spotlight to shine. While Jonathan Antoine's soaring vocals continued to enchant audiences across continents, a different, quieter battle was unfolding behind the scenes, one that had nothing to do with melodies or music charts and everything to do with mental resilience. For years, Jonathan had wrestled with the scars of his adolescence, where bullying over his weight and introversion had left deep emotional wounds. Though fans saw him as the confident tenor commanding stages, he often struggled with paralyzing anxiety, frequent panic attacks, and periods of self-doubt that cast long shadows over his successes. In 2024, during a rare in-depth interview, Jonathan revealed for the first time that he had been diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder, a revelation that instantly reframed his journey for many who had followed his career since BGT. He spoke candidly about how sensory overload, social expectations, and emotional dysregulation had challenged him both on and off stage, explaining that the high-intensity demands of touring often required him to retreat into silence just to regroup. Rather than hiding these realities, Jonathan chose to confront them head-on, becoming a soft-spoken advocate for neurodiversity and mental health in the performance arts. At the same time, he began a personal transformation that included significant physical changes, most notably a dramatic weight loss of over 56 pounds achieved through a careful combination of structured dieting, walking, and therapy. But he was quick to clarify that this change wasn't about public approval or vanity. It was about self-respect and preservation. "I needed to treat myself like someone worth protecting," he said, in a statement that resonated deeply with fans who had watched his evolution from fragile teen to quietly powerful adult. These battles, private and profound, became part of Jonathan's larger narrative, not as footnotes, but as defining chapters. He didn't just sing about pain loved, and hope, he lived those themes. And through his honesty, he allowed others to see that greatness is often forged not in moments of triumph, but in the quiet, unseen hours when no one is watching. And the hardest thing to do is simply keep going. Between 2023 and 2025, Jonathan Antoine's career took an unexpected and somewhat cryptic turn, one marked not by new album releases or sold-out arena tours, but by a deliberate retreat from the limelight that left fans curious, anxious, and endlessly speculative. While he continued to perform selectively at prestigious venues and festivals, the once steady rhythm of public appearances gave way to long periods of silence, during which rumors began to swirl about what the enigmatic tenor was really up to. On social media, his presence became increasingly minimal, punctuated by occasional glimpses into his home studio, a modest yet impressively outfitted space near the outskirts of London, where followers noticed clues that hinted at something far bigger than a break. Leaked whispers from music insiders suggested that Jonathan had begun recording a deeply personal crossover album blending classical vocals with cinematic orchestration, a project he was producing and co-writing himself with input from film composers and experimental arrangers. But the most persistent buzz centered around a rumored documentary project, tentatively titled Beyond the High Sea, which insiders claimed would chronicle Jonathan's life in unprecedented depth, from childhood trauma and autism diagnosis to the behind-the-scenes toll of BGT stardom. According to one unnamed source close to the project, the film would include never-before-seen home footage, backstage confessionals from the talent show years, and exclusive studio sessions documenting his evolution as an independent artist. Meanwhile, eagle-eyed fans added fuel to the fire by spotting sheet music from an unreleased game score in the background of a live stream, prompting theories that Jonathan had been recruited to lend his vocals to a 2024 fantasy video game soundtrack, an intersection of classical power and pop culture that would signal a bold new direction. Whether these developments were intentionally kept under wraps for maximum impact or simply the product of an artist choosing solitude over spectacle, one thing was clear: Jonathan Antoine was not idling. He was creating, refining, and possibly reimagining his career in ways that could once again surprise the world. In the absence of press tours and promotion, it was the mystery itself that kept the fandom buzzing and made the wait for his next move all the more tantalizing. As of 2025, Jonathan Antoine stands not as a fading memory of reality TV glory, but as a testament to the enduring power of authenticity, discipline, and emotional depth in an industry often dominated by flash and fleeting fame. With an estimated net worth of £4 million and a portfolio that includes multiple chart-topping classical albums, a successful solo touring career across North America and Europe, and millions of loyal fans worldwide, Jonathan has achieved what few talent show alumni ever do. He has not just survived the spotlight, he has transcended it. He lives a relatively quiet life outside of London, where he has constructed a fully equipped home studio on his property, allowing him to compose, rehearse, and record on his own schedule, free from the rigid timelines of corporate labels. He continues vocal training under the guidance of his longtime coach Joy Mammon, refusing to rest on past achievements and insisting instead on evolving both technically and artistically. While his official social media presence remains modest, what little he shares reveals a man deeply connected to his values, posting candid reflections on mental health, occasional clips from voice acting projects, and teasers of unreleased musical experiments. Notably, in early 2025, several dates on his By Request tour were abruptly labeled as postponed, sparking speculation that he was diverting his energy towards studio work or preparing for a long-teased multimedia release. Though he has never confirmed the reasons, fans speculate it could be tied to the rumored crossover album or the anticipated documentary Beyond the High Sea. His YouTube channel, though not frequently updated, continues to attract millions of views from new and returning fans, many of whom find inspiration in the consistency and soulfulness of his performances. Unlike artists who chase relevance through reinvention, Jonathan's appeal lies in his steadfast commitment to emotional honesty and musical excellence. He is, by all accounts, a modern-day maestro, one who chooses integrity over impulse and quality over clout. And in a world that often rewards noise over nuance, Jonathan Antoine's quiet command is perhaps the most radical success story of all. As the curtain gently lowers on the first decade of Jonathan Antoine's career, the lingering question isn't whether he succeeded. It's whether his most powerful act has yet to begin. From bullied schoolboy to global tenor, from viral sensation to a quietly commanding artist who refuses to be boxed in by genre or public expectation, Jonathan has demonstrated a rare kind of resilience, the ability to evolve without ever losing sight of who he is. His story is not one of constant spotlight, but of selective presence, not of explosive reinvention, but of quiet refinement. And that is precisely what makes his future so tantalizing. With whispers of a crossover album, rumors of a documentary that could redefine his public image, and hints at a broader multimedia expansion including voice acting and composition, Jonathan stands on the edge of yet another transformation, this time on his terms in his time, and with a clear vision sharpened by years of personal growth and artistic discipline. For his fans, the anticipation isn't just about hearing another high C. It's about witnessing the next evolution of an artist who has already broken so many molds and silenced so many doubts. There's something profoundly moving about someone who once trembled with anxiety, now holding command of every stage he steps on, and something even more powerful in watching him inspire others not by chasing fame, but by showing that true artistry can thrive in stillness, study, and slow-burning purpose. In an industry obsessed with speed, virality, and reinvention, Jonathan Antoine's methodical rise and his refusal to conform to anyone else's tempo is nothing short of revolutionary. As the world waits for what he does next, the question is no longer whether he will surprise us, but how. Because if history is any indication, Jonathan's story isn't winding down. It's just beginning a more deliberate, more daring, and perhaps most brilliant chapter yet. If Jonathan's story moved you, let us know in the comments. What do you think his next act will be? And if you want more untold stories like this one, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss a deep dive.